All right, my friends, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. Say it ain't so. It's time to do an Oklahoma bombing show.
Oh, I say it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok.
Oh, my God, another bomb.
All right, and the guest this hour is V.Z. Lawton. He worked in the Oklahoma City Federal Building when it was destroyed on April the 19th, 1995. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
It's nice to talk to you again. And I want to say real quick, we're going to get into a couple more sound bites, and we have all kinds of things to talk about as far as the Oklahoma City bombing. But I first want to go ahead and give everybody plenty of footnotes to get started. So everybody grab a pen and a piece of paper so you can write these places down where you can find out the truth about the Oklahoma City bombing. First and foremost is the final report on the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, April 19, 1995, by the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, of which Mr. Lawton is a part. Secondly, the New American Magazine, the magazine of the John Birch Society, for 10 years straight, has done the single best reporting on the Oklahoma City bombing anywhere. They gave Pulitzer Prizes to people who deserved them. He would have got one a long, long time ago. If you go to thenewamerican.com and click on their subject index and then click Oklahoma City, you can find dozens of articles containing much factual information that you may not be familiar with. Also, AfterOklahomaCity.com is the website of Kathy Wilburn, whose two grandsons died in the bombing that day and has a new book. The Secret Life of Bill Clinton is a book that was written by a reporter for the Daily Telegraph in Great Britain named Ambrose Evans Pritchard. And in his book, The Secret Life of Bill Clinton, one whole section is on Oklahoma City bombing. Very good stuff in there. Also, Others Unknown by Stephen Jones, who was Timothy McVeigh's lawyer. There's a book called The Politics of Terror by a guy named Hoffman. And there's a book called The Third Terrorist by Jana Davis, although I haven't read that one, so I can't really vouch for it. And I know that she's fallen in with James Woolsey and all the neoconservatives at the American Enterprise Institute, Lori Milroy. And by the way, Lori Milroy is another often quoted source on the Oklahoma City bombing, and she is completely full of it, may I say. Ramzi Youssef is not Iraqi, okay? So there's your whole stupid conspiracy theory down the toilet, Lori Milroy. He's from Pakistan. He's not Iraqi. Okay, so you're dumb. All right, now back to the show. I interviewed, one more footnote. PhilipDrew.com is my website of my old radio show, PhilipDru.com, and I have multiple interviews on this subject, 2 or 3 of them with Christopher Emery from the Oklahoma Bombing Commission, one previous interview of Mr. Lawton, and 2 different interviews of Charles Key, a former state representative. One of them includes he and a former FBI agent by the name of Rick Ojeda at the same time. So if you go to PhilipDrew.com, there's hours worth of interviews on this topic. And I guess I'm not even going to get to my first question before this break. I should let you know that tomorrow night, Sunday night, on Fox News channel, they're going to do a special featuring V.Z. Lawton. And that should be very interesting to watch. And there's also articles on FoxNews.com about some of the things we're going to talk about today. They're only just now beginning to catch on, 10 years too late. It's the Weekend Interview Show. We'll be right back with V.Z. Lawton, Oklahoma bombing survivor.
Can you tell me, they have found bomb squad is there, west corner of the Murrah building. Is that correct? Another bomb inside the Murrah building.
Supposedly there may be another device there.
Maybe another device there, and they are evacuating the area.
And we'll reiterate again what these later devices are doing to the rescue effort. Time is so valuable right now as they try to get to these people who perhaps somehow are still hanging on to life inside that building. And each delay, every time the firefighters and the rescuers are called back and brought back down off of their ladders and scaffoldings, just could be exacting a terrible, terrible toll on the people who are already inside.
Yes, it is. And we talked earlier about the two undetonated bombs that were found that were bigger than the device that exploded. And if this other one that they're looking at now turns out to be something, it appears that it was meant for this building to come down, to be leveled.
The reports I have is that one device was deactivated. Apparently there's another device, and obviously whatever did the damage to the Murrah building was a tremendous, very sophisticated explosive.
Okay, now that was Governor Frank Keating, that last soundbite right there, confirming, and we will continue to play different audio clips from the local news footage that day. If we don't get to all of them, you should know that there's a tape of, I forget the exact name of it, but you can search for Oklahoma City bombing news footage. And in this tape, throughout the different scenes of this footage, the ATF, the FBI, the Justice Department, the local police bomb squad, and the fire department all confirm the presence of at least 2 undetonated bombs that were found inside the building and removed. And in fact, you can even see them driving away in their bomb squad truck in one of the clips there. To help explain multiple bombs inside, everybody knows that the federal building was destroyed by a fertilizer bomb in a Ryder truck parked outside. Isn't that right, Mr. Lawton?
Well, that's what the government would like for everybody to believe, that I was sitting in the building and I experienced a totally different set of circumstances.
Oh, really? And how so?
Well, I was signing papers that morning when I felt the building start shaking. And the lights went out, debris started falling on my desk, and something knocked a hole in the back of my head and knocked me out before the truck bomb ever went off.
So
that tells you the building was already coming down before the truck bomb went off.
So you're telling me you were already knocked out cold before the windows broke in? And
Right. That's substantiated by the University of Oklahoma Geology School seismograph, and Dr. Arthur Brown gave his, he studied the seismograph, and his judgment was that there's 2 separate explosions, one that occurred about 7 to 9 seconds after the first.
Right. In
the
fact,
first one being probably the high explosives that were wrapped around the 4 columns that did come down.
Now, Mr. Brown, Ray Brown, at the I believe at the U.S. Geological Survey, the FBI came and seized all of his seismograph records, but luckily he had already copied them and stashed some away safely. And in fact, if I remember this story correctly, Mr. Lawton, did they not set up seismographs on the last day when they finally did use demolition charges to bring down the rest of the shell of the building, and then they compared the seismograph information from the first day and the last day, and they proved that there were multiple bombs going off inside the building before the truck bomb went off last?
Yeah, what they tried to say was that the second blip on the seismograph was the pancaking of all the floors down on the on the ground. And that was about a third of the building that had come down then. On the day that they demolished the building and brought it down with the explosives wrapped around the columns, there was just one blip. It didn't even get a reading when the rest, all those other floors fell and hit the ground.
Okay, so now let's be clear here from your own personal experience. You say the building started shaking, something fell off the wall and hit you on the head, is that right?
Well, it fell from up above. There wasn't any walls in that building other than just little, sheetrock walls. I wasn't even close to the wall. It was stuff that came down from up above. I was right about 6 feet from where it dropped off, and I have no idea what it was that hit me. It had to be something pretty solid, though, because that afternoon there was a hole in the back of my head and the blood was still running out of it. I didn't even know it was happening to me. But
the important part is that you were already laying on the ground before the glass blew in and the truck went outside and detonated. All right, let me see if I can help back you up there, and let's go ahead and play clip number 46. This is your friend Jack.
So if you weren't under that desk, you wouldn't have made it.
Well, my floor was okay, and the ceiling had come down, but there was still concrete above, so it was just a corner of the office that was left that we were in. Everybody else that we worked with is gone.
Are you okay? Just the corner of your office was okay, and the rest of the floor was completely flattened?
And we go over the edge and look, and you can see the sky and as far down as you can look, and just a hole.
And which floor were you on?
Fifth. Fifth floor.
Just the one corner of the fifth floor wasn't completely flattened.
I don't know what the building looks like.
Did everybody just crawled out of the desk after?
It was like slow motion. We crawled under before the glass started coming and everything. It just seemed to roll in on us. I thought it was an earthquake when it started. It was just a kind of a shake, and then everything started going like this, and I dove under the desk, and then all the glass came in and the ceiling's coming down. And I probably got cut worse if I hadn't been under the desk. I just got little scrapes and scratches. I was really lucky.
Really lucky.
Yes, really lucky. Sounds to me like something was happening to that building before the truck bomb exploded. Mr. Lawton, you say you know this guy?
Oh, yeah, Jack Gobin. I used to work out with him at 5:30 in the morning at Y.
And
YMCA was catty corner across the street from us.
And you would say that he is an honest guy?
Oh, yeah, he's a super nice guy. And, yeah, he's honest.
Does he still tell the same story, that the building was shaking for 10 seconds before the glass blew in and he was safely protected by his desk that he was hiding under?
Oh, as far as I know, yes. I haven't talked to him in a while, but...
and that audio came from as he's walking down the sidewalk with a little cut on his head right after the bomb.
Yeah, I think he was doing an interview with one of the local TV stations.
Right. Okay, well, and as long as we're on the subject of multiple bombs, sir, the number one question that hopefully is springing to everybody's mind, who could have had access to the inside of that building to place bombs on the columns?
Anybody. We had people working, construction workers working in the building continually, and anybody could pass themselves off as a construction worker.
So there wasn't really much security there?
Oh, there wasn't any at all. We were in the middle of the United States in Oklahoma. Nobody ever thought about having something like that happen.
Okay, and let's see, more on the multiple bombs topic. First of all, let me bring up the Eglin test structure. There's an Air Force base in Florida called Eglin Air Force Base, and they built a test structure there, and they practiced blowing up a bunch of bombs out in front of the damn thing, trying to knock it down, and none of that worked. And so finally they went ahead and put bombs inside the building, attached them to the columns, and what do you know, the building came down. And so that was the double-blind study extra proof that the truck bomb outside could not have done it. Also is important to note, I think, Mr. Lawton, that the crater is adjacent to columns 4 and 5, is much smaller than the drawing, the artist's renderings in the news magazines. It was a much smaller crater than they said, and it was not adjacent to the damage that went deepest into the building, correct?
That's right. It was closest to the column that I was sitting next to. So
what we have here is a blast wave traveling through the air that takes a right and gets stronger as it gets farther away.
Right. That defies all laws of physics.
I got a problem with that, I'm afraid. Also, we should bring up here and talk about General Parton. Well, why don't you tell us about who's General Benton Parton?
Well,
and what would he
right here in my house for 2 days this week. He came down to Oklahoma for our conference that we had at the Cox Center. General Parton was head of explosive research development for the Air Force before he retired, and he even invented some products that they're still using. And after he saw the configuration on the way the building came down, on his own nickel, he flew down here, tried to get in. They wouldn't let him inside the building, but he got close enough and got pictures from that he took and other people gave him that showed that the columns had been wrapped with at least four of those columns were wrapped. The 4 columns that came down had been wrapped with a high explosive and probably an electronic detonator set on them. And that's when they punched the button. That's, I think, probably what I felt when the building started shaking. It was already coming down.
And Mr. Parton is specific here in that he not only just says, and in fact, I've read his report, and he wrote a letter to Trent Lott back when he was the majority leader of the Senate right after the bombing. where he said, listen, let's take every number that the FBI uses and let's error on the side of the government story. They say it was a 4,800-pound bomb. Let's say it was a 5,000-pound bomb. They say it was a bunch of barrels stacked up in a truck. Let's pretend it was a perfectly shaped charge with 100% detonation. They say it was here. Let's say it was 15 feet closer. They say this, and he errors on the side of the FBI in every case, and then he does the math, and he says that by the time the blast wave got to the closest column, it had the pressure of a bicycle tire.
Well, it was 375 pounds per square inch pressure. That report is in our book, the final report. We included his whole report on the way the building came down in our book, and anybody that wants that book, they will also get his report in it.
And that's okcbombing.org. You can order the final report.
He says that it drops off at a negative cubed amount from the center of the blast. For every foot you go away, it drops off a negative cubed amount, and by the time it dropped from 1 million pounds per square inch pressure at the center of the truck to the first column there, it had dropped down to 375 pounds.
There's also the fracture mode, the smooth break from the demolition charges as opposed to a sharp, jagged fracture from a blast wave far away. It's the Weekend Interview Show. I'm talking with VZ Lawton, Oklahoma bombing survivor. We'll be right back.
To this proceeding, basically, there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
Everybody, looking down here. Now, what's the electricity line?
All right, my friends, that was audio from across the street. They were recording a business meeting the morning of the Oklahoma City bombing. And what you heard there, it's kind of difficult to tell exactly what you're listening to there at first. So let me explain, and then I'll play it for you again. First, you hear boom, 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 and that is the sound of the bombs. After that, there's a lot of different feedback and rustling. I believe the tape recorder is inside a briefcase or a purse or something. It's being jostled around. So you're not supposed to take every noise there as a separate explosion. But it can clearly be heard. Boom, 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 boom. Let's play that one more time.
With regard to this proceeding, basically, there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
All right, that is audio of multiple bombs exploding in front of inside and in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in April of 1995. I'm joined on the phone by VZ Lawton. He was in the building at the time it was destroyed, and he has told us that the building was shaking for at least quite a few seconds. Something had fallen and knocked him out before the glass came in, before the truck bomb outside had been detonated. And I want to make sure to try to cover every angle on the multiple bomb part that I can, Mr. Lawton, here, and then we can get into the neo-Nazis and the Al-Qaeda types and their involvement in the second half hour. But I want to try to make sure that I can cover as much of just basically the confusion about what happened there that day. I know that the bomb squad was there at 7 in the morning and stayed for about an hour or an hour and a half and then finally left. And the bombing didn't take place until 9. Is that right?
That's right.
And
witnesses that talked to us later and said that they'd seen the bomb truck there that morning, Oklahoma County Bomb Squad. And, of course, they gave an explanation that they were going to get hamburgers or something with a big truck and a trailer, which didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think one of the most important things, and we've been pounding on this issue for quite some time now, and it's creating a lot of problems for the government's scenario that they've painted about what happened that day. If they would just release the videos that were in the cameras on the front of the building, it would either prove what I say is correct or prove them to be correct.
Well, Mr. Lawton, what makes you think that they have any video footage of what happened there that day?
Well, because in November of '99, we put in a request under my name, the Freedom of Information Act, to have the videos released on the two that were on the front of the Murrah building and then 22 other locations in downtown Oklahoma City on the other buildings. And we got a reply back from them saying, yeah, we got them, but you can't have them.
Oh, really? So they admit that they have 24 different angles.
Oh, yeah. But we just can't have them. Judge Mace has them under seal. Well, why? McVeigh has been tried, convicted, and executed. Nichols wasn't even down there, so why would you need those? Why would it affect him? And the problem is it's going to show who the John Doe 2 was that got out of the truck, walked to the back, walked back around to the front, walked over and got in a brown Chevy pickup with two other John Doe 2s. Now, the videos on the Murrah building won't show McVeigh getting into the yellow Mercury in the parking lot across the street, but the one that's on the Journal Record building across the alley and across the street will show the Mercury pulling out and driving down the alley, and it'll show the John Doe 2 that was in the Mercury. And
we know this because reporters for the L.A. Times have seen the video and written about what they've seen, right?
Well, I don't know what they've seen. I didn't know that.
Yeah, my understanding. In fact, I have audio of the, which it's too long of a clip to play on the show today with all the commercials. We just don't have time.
Yeah.
But there's a clip of Jana Davis from Channel 4 News there in Oklahoma City doing a story about two witnesses, unidentified people, who were shown the videos. At least one of them being a reporter for the L.A. Times. I know the L.A. Times wrote about it, and the Channel 4 News in Oklahoma City did computer rendering recreations based on what the witnesses said they saw in some of those videotapes. So we do know for a fact that they exist.
Well, yeah, they do exist.
And we also know that, well, at least according to these people who say they've seen the tapes and describe them to Channel 4 and to the L.A. Times, that there was somebody else in the Ryder truck with McVeigh that morning, for sure.
Well, the thing that they really don't want anybody to see on those videos is that the building was coming down before the truck bomb went off. That just blows their whole scenario that they painted in the trials and the evidence that they submitted.
Yep. All right. And, I mean, think about that for a moment, y'all. This is the biggest murder in America since Wounded Knee. The biggest news story ever before September 11th. Stay tuned. It's the Weekend Interview Show. We'll be right back.
Take your guns to town, son. Leave your guns at home, Bill. Don't take your guns to town.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Because you can handle the truth.
Just saw, if you were watching there was a white pickup truck backing a trailer into the scene here. They're trying to move people out of the way so they can get it in. Appears to be the Oklahoma County Bomb Squad. It's their bomb disposal unit, essentially, is what it is, and it is what they would use to, if the report that we gave you just a few moments ago turns out to be correct, that they have found a second explosive device of some kind inside this building. They'll back that trailer down there, and the bomb squad folks will go in, and they will use that trailer. You see the bucket on the back there, sort of, this is how they would transport the explosive device away from this populated area to try to do something with it.
If you are outside the metro area, you'd have to be well outside the metro area if you did not feel the blast that occurred.
This was just a few moments ago.
People running north away from the federal building.
The government didn't do a good job of proving that Terry Nichols was greatly involved in all of this.
I mean, you realize that most people in this country think you're responsible for the bombing, correct?
Correct.
Right. So if your perception is that you didn't get a fair trial, they're saying, so what?
That's Ed Bradley, the best reporter in America, sticking the hard questions to Timothy McVeigh, the mass murderer. Who cares whether you got a fair trial, kid, right? And, anyway, Ed Bradley, man. Kill yourself, man. Oh, sorry. Okay, anyway, that clip there where the woman said the government didn't do a good job of proving that Terry Nichols was involved in any of this, okay, so what? Average quote from some big mouth lady, right? Oh, no, sorry. She was the forewoman of his jury. And it turns out that Terry Nichols was going to be acquitted. That when the jury first went back to discuss his case, when they went back into the room after the trial, the original vote was 10-2 to acquit him. And according to the Rocky Mountain News, they quoted one of the two state worshipers on that jury who said that they just couldn't believe that they wanted to let Terry Nichols go. And so what we did, we made them cry. And what happened was, basically, the two people who worship the state as though it created them browbeat the rest of the jurors into convicting Terry Nichols. Now, they compromised, basically, and said, oh, gee, okay, I guess we have to compromise with this guy's life. So they found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter. And Judge Mage went ahead and sentenced him to life in prison based on that involuntary manslaughter conviction. And don't get me wrong, folks, because I'm not trying to make the case that Terry Nichols was innocent. I'm trying to make the case that the government didn't dare prove that Terry Nichols was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, because in order to do so, they would have had to implicate themselves. Mr. Lawton, am I way off base?
No, as a matter of fact, I was still, when his trial was going on, I was pulling up the transcripts of his trial every morning on the computer and reading them. And I told the people that I worked with, I said, well, if I was sitting on his jury, I'd have to vote for acquittal. And
now, you don't think he's innocent, do you, Mr. Lawton?
No, he's not. But I'm just basing it, my judgment is based on the evidence that the government submitted. And they just didn't have a strong enough case with the evidence that they submitted. They didn't use everything they had. That's why I would have voted for acquittal.
What else do you think it was that they had that they didn't use?
Well, he was involved with the Middle Eastern terrorists out of the Philippines, Cebu City. He was allegedly going over there to get a mail-order bride, little Marifay. I don't know, it seems like he made somewhere between 6 and 12 trips over there, which are pretty expensive, I think, to get a round-trip airfare to the Philippines. And I don't know where the money would have come from for that if there hadn't been some organization supplying him with that.
Well, there's been more and more information about what exactly Terry Nichols was doing in the Philippines. It turns out at that same time, Ramzi Youssef, Abdul Hakim Murad, and Wali Khan Amin Shah were working on their Bojinka plot to hijack 11 planes and crash them into the Pacific Ocean and maybe even CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. There are at least 2 different witnesses. One of them, a man named Edwin Angeles, who is a former terrorist who was tortured by the Philippine Secret Service, police, CIA guys, whatever they call them over there, and decided he would turn state's witness. And Edwin Angeles, who I believe is now dead, identified Terry Nichols as the farmer, right, the white man from the Midwest who came to take bomb-making school with Ramzi Youssef and Abdul Hakim Murad. So, interestingly also, this is a big part of the book by Stephen Jones, Others Unknown. And he tried very hard, Mr. Lawton, correct, to introduce this Philippine evidence at Timothy McVeigh's federal trial?
Yeah, Judge Mace wouldn't allow any evidence submitted at all that pertained to a Middle East connection.
And did he say why?
Just said it wasn't pertinent.
And, this is something that Charles Key actually mentioned. I watched a video of a press conference that he gave just last night where he was saying that even among the investigators on the Oklahoma Bombing Investigation Committee, and maybe especially before that, in the first couple of years after the bombing, that of all the people who knew that the government was lying through their teeth, there was still a big problem in deciding what exactly the truth was, and that it was very hard for people to accept the idea that angry white men with guns would be working with Middle Eastern terrorists to kill Americans. And so basically there became sort of two separate conspiracy theories, one of them about the men in the brown pickup truck and Nichols' ties to the Philippines, and the other about Timothy McVeigh and his ties to the Aryan Republican Army bank robbery ring based out of Elohim City in eastern Oklahoma. And I guess it's only, according to Mr. Key, it's only been in the last few years that the idea has sort of been accepted that it is possible indeed to have some right-wing Nazi types working with some Arabs to blow up Americans.
Well, I think Roger Charles kind of hit the nail on the head. Who you remember him? He was an investigative reporter for ABC television, and basically went to work for Stephen Jones, and then came back and worked for us for a while. He said that he thought there were two separate entities that were involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, and that had Mr. Evil Genius sitting up above both of them, controlling them. We just don't know who Mr. Evil Genius is. All these things you were talking about, Project Bojinka, Nichols being in the Philippines with the same time Ramsey Youssef was, is part of the lawsuit that 25 of us have filed against the Republic of Iraq.
Well, now let me stop you there because, well, first of all, let me say real quick that Abdul Hakim Murad was in jail in New York on the day of the Oklahoma bombing and told his guard that we did it, the Liberation Army, we accept responsibility, claiming what they considered credit, I guess. That's one thing. But secondly, the Republic of Iraq, VZ, this is the Lori Milroy, James Woolsey, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz conspiracy theory that Saddam Hussein did it. But that's BS. Ramsey Youssef is not Iraqi.
He supported, I got some evidence that he supported the group over there financially.
Yeah, I would be careful of that. I think Jana Davis has, let herself be flattered by Jim Woolsey and some of these evil neoconservatives who, want a pretext for war when, the proof is it's been laid out for years and years. There is no operational connection between Al-Qaeda and Iraq. There never was. And, the fact that Al-Qaeda types had met with Saddam Hussein's government here or there, maybe. But the idea that Saddam Hussein financed the attack in Oklahoma City, I can't buy that for a minute. And I would say that you guys should be really careful of Lori Milroy and these American Enterprise Institute types, because they are liars and murderers.
Well, I don't know anything about them. I just know what the evidence we have that we submitted to the court up in Washington, D.C., and we got a default judgment against the Republic of Iraq on that.
Well, what evidence do you have that Saddam Hussein was supporting this group in the lawsuit?
Rather than talk to me about that, you ought to talk to Michael Johnston. He's the attorney.
I do need to interview him.
He can give you a lot of information. I've been exposed to it, but not being an attorney, I can't remember all that stuff and
I understand.
And repeat it like he can do it.
I understand.
And he's got a very, very good investigator out of Fort Worth, Texas, that has been over the Middle East quite a bit and Philippines that has provided him with a lot of that information.
Right. Now, I think Lori Milroy is onto something when she talks about Nichols' connections to Youssef, but I think the point where it all gets screwy is her whole theory is that this guy Youssef is really somebody else who was an Iraqi special ops guy or something like that, when in fact it turns out that that's completely false. He is exactly who the government has been saying he is all along. And him and his uncle Khalid Sheikh Mohammed became friends with Ayman al-Zawahiri and Osama bin Laden, and this is basically the first World Trade Center bombing, Oklahoma City, were both basically lead-up precursors to September 11th by more or less the very same group of men.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence that ties them together.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's skip on.
Don't forget about Kerry Gagan too.
Oh yeah, tell us about Kerry Gagan. Who's Kerry Gagan?
Kerry Gagan was a drug runner for the Middle Eastern terrorist group in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he started finding explosives mixed in with these drugs that he was running up from South America or Central America, and he went in to them and said, hey, what's going on? They said, well, we're getting ready to blow up the federal building. We'll pay you $250,000 to help us. And he said, well, let me think about that. And he went straight into federal law enforcement in Denver, told them the story, and said, you know, you may get me for running drugs, but you're not going to get me for blowing up federal buildings. I'm out of this. He said, hell no. He said, we need you to stay in there so we can keep track of what's going on. So he said, well, okay. He said, give me a letter of immunity. He got his letter of immunity and proceeded to continue running these drugs. And he did some other things for them encasing different buildings across the country. And March the 27th, he took a letter into the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver, which was his point of contact as a confidential informant. And in that letter, he told him, he said, I got information that there'll be a federal building blown up in Denver or a city nearby within 30 days. Call me at this number. He gave him the phone number where he'd be. He said, I waited there 2 days. He said, they never called me. He said, I couldn't wait any longer. And he was a little irritated with him. But then on, I think it was the 3rd of April, he was called into a meeting with the guys that he worked for. He said these 2 guys were 2 Arabs. And I didn't understand Arabic, and they were talking in Arabic at the table where they had a set of plans. So there were 2 Caucasians and 2 Mexicans. And they finally called him up to the table and said he got to look at the plans, and they were plans of the Murrah building. So he thought, well, I better go back in and give him one more warning. And on April the 6th, he was afraid to go back into the Byron Rogers Federal Building there in Denver because the Arabs watched him part of the time. So he had a taxi cab friend of his he'd gone through junior high school that he trusted, had him carry a letter into him, got a receipt for it. And in that letter, he told him, said, I got new information. There's going to be a federal building blown up in Denver, a city nearby, within 2 weeks. Said, if you don't call me this time, you won't hear from me again. And he said, left the phone number. Said, I went to stay 2 days. I couldn't stay any longer. They never called.
Has Kerr-Gagan identified the men who recruited him?
Yep.
And who are they? Can you say?
Well, I don't want to say it right now. We're still working on it, and I haven't given that information out yet. I'm pretty sure that you're probably knowledgeable of U.S. Representative Rohrabacher from California's intention to hold a congressional hearing on the Murrah building bombing.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, he wants to do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And let me stop you right there for a second. This is the biggest crime. I mean, before September 11th, this is the biggest traumatic event ever to happen to the American people on their own land since the Civil War, basically. And neither the House or the Senate held a single hearing on this case. The biggest crime ever, not the Reform Committee or the Judiciary Committee, the House or the Senate. They have never held hearings on this. And now you're saying that finally Dana Rohrabacher, who is sometimes okay and sometimes a vicious, bloodthirsty warmonger, that he has now decided that he wants to hold some hearings in the House of Representatives, huh?
Well, he read Janet Davis's book and said that the evidence of a Middle East connection to the bombing was too strong not to investigate it.
Well, now we need to talk about Carol Howe and the connection with the neo-Nazis, the Aryan Republican Army, the bank robbery ring as well. Who's Carol Howe, Mr. Lawton?
Well, Carol Howe was the daughter of a wealthy Tulsa oil man who got connected up with Dennis Mahon, who was head of the Ku Klux Klan. And she, I don't know, I can't remember all the details in the story, but she was taken into the group that was down at Elohim City, which was a religious compound, but they also had some guys down there that weren't too religious.
It was a neo-Nazi compound, is what it is.
Yeah, and well, they had this Reverend Millar, which they held themselves out to be a religious compound, but they really weren't as religious as they held themselves out to be. And they also had Andreas Strassmeyer, a German national that had been in this country for 6 years without having proper papers. And he was their trainer. They were training people down there to.
There were indications that this guy Strassmeyer wasn't really a neo-Nazi, but was actually an undercover cop, right?
Well, he was probably with the FBI. He was probably their. He had to be part of our either CIA, FBI.
All right. Well, we're running up on this break. So long story short, the ATF had this undercover informant, Carol Howe, who said that, look, these guys are ready to blow up some stuff. She did all this reporting. She drove the car when they cased the building. She told her, in fact, I know that's true because her handler, ATF agent Angela Finley, admitted so under oath in one of the pretrial depositions that she drove the car when they cased the building and then went and picked up her ATF handler and drove her the same route the next day. And she warned them that there was going to be a bombing, and the ATF was prepared to raid Waco style when Bob Ricks, who we may remember as the spokesman for the FBI during the Waco massacre. Remember, we put massive gas in there. That's Bob Ricks. He was the head of the Tulsa office of the FBI 2 years later at Waco.
No.
And he called off.
The City office. But the Tulsa office came under the Oklahoma City office.
Oh, it's under the Oklahoma City office.
Yeah.
But he's the one who called off the ATF's raid on Elohim City, saying, we'll handle it, right?
Well, he said we already got an informant in there.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, hang tight. VZ Lawton, he survived the Oklahoma City bombing. We're talking about what really happened in that day. It's the Weekend Interview Show. Be right back.
Oh, I see it again. You've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok.
All right, welcome back to the Weekend Interview Show. Website is weekendinterviewshow.com. If you want to listen to the archives of any of the previous interviews, keep them all there in MP3 format for you. Also write for antiwar.com. Have an article up this weekend called Blame Wilson. Take a look at that if you like. You can email me, scott@weekendinterviewshow.com or scott@antiwar.com. I'm talking with a member of the Oklahoma City Bombing Investigation Committee. His name is VZ Lawton. He actually survived the bombing, was inside the building when it happened, and reported that the building was shaking for a good few moments before the glass ever blew in, indicating multiple explosions there that day as opposed to a single fertilizer bomb parked outside. And speaking of which, I've interviewed Frederick Whitehurst, formerly of the FBI, a whistleblower, who testified in Nichols' state trial that the FBI agent Stephen Burmeister perjured himself when he claimed that he could prove ammonium nitrate crystals on a piece of plywood that supposedly proved an ammonium nitrate bomb was used. And Fred Whitehurst says that it's an outright deliberate lie. And it turns out really the only evidence that the government has that the truck bomb there that day that complemented the bombs inside the building or supplemented them. The only proof that that was ammonium nitrate and fuel oil is they found a receipt at Nichols' house for some fertilizer. They actually don't have a single molecule of evidence to say what that truck bomb was made out of whatsoever. Isn't that right, Mr. Lawton?
Yeah, they call that piece of evidence Q509. And it was a piece of the sideboard of the truck that they swore had a ammonium nitrate crystal in it. But that piece of the truck had laid outside all night long, and it rained, and ammonium nitrate, being hydroscopic, if it, even if it had an ammonium nitrate crystal in it, when it started, it would have been gone before they picked it up, and it wasn't picked up by anybody in the police department or any law enforcement officers. Somebody just handed it to them. They sent it back to the FBI lab, said that they did have a crystal in there, and for some reason they sent it up to a Canadian lab, and the whole thing got lost.
Yeah, funny.
But they used it as evidence against them.
Yep, and put McVeigh to death based on that evidence, and we only find out later that Stephen Burmeister was deliberately lying, which is a felony to commit perjury. But of course, not if you work for the government. You're allowed to lie and murder whoever you want.
Apparently.
Mr. Lawton, also, it's in Stephen Jones' book that he took McVeigh's quote-unquote recipe for his truck bomb to the Scotland Yard, and they took one look at it and started laughing and said, "Is your client still alive?" And Stephen Jones said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, then he didn't make this bomb." He supposedly drove this 7,000 pounds it is now? It's funny how the size keeps growing. He drove it 200 miles in a dually without blowing himself up from Geary State Lake to Oklahoma City?
Yeah, I think the flash point was 95 degrees. Of course, it wasn't that hot then, but, jumping around, juggling around the truck, you could have increased the temperature.
Jeez, I wish I could believe in any of this and just be done with it.
There's an awful lot of incredible evidence.
I'll tell you what. All right, Mr. Lawton, Mr. B.Z. Lawton, survivor of the Oklahoma City bombing. In last 45 seconds or so, sir, if you can recommend places where people can study up and see if they can figure out some of these loose ends.
There is something that I want to get out.
Oh, quickly,
real quick.
Go ahead.
Let me give you the phone number for Dana Rohrbacher.
Oh, please do.
202-225-2415. Now, Henry Hyde has asked him to not do an investigation.
Yeah, of course.
We need to call him and tell him to support Rohrbacher, and his number is 202-225-3121.
Great. Thank you very much. BZ Lawton, OKCbombing.org.